Jacob Carter was a man of simple habits. He liked his coffee black, his quarters tidy, and his work straightforward. As an explorer for the human fleet, he spent most of his days aboard the Eclipse, charting new star systems and scanning planets for signs of life or resources. It wasn't glamorous work, but Jacob found peace in the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the endless expanse of stars outside his viewport. On this particular day, however, the routine changed. While conducting a standard sweep of a barren moon orbiting a distant gas giant, Jacob's sensors picked up something unusual. A faint energy signature pulsed from a crater near the moon's equator. At first, he thought it might be a piece of debris or perhaps remnants of an ancient civilization. Either way, it warranted investigation. Grabbing his helmet and a portable scanner, Jacob climbed into a small shuttle and descended toward the surface. The moon was cold and desolate, its gray landscape stretching endlessly under a pale orange sky. Dust kicked up as the shuttle touched down near the source of the signal. Jacob stepped out cautiously, his boots crunching against the rocky terrain. His scanner beeped softly, guiding him toward the anomaly. What Jacob found took his breath away. Huddled at the bottom of the crater was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was sleek and covered in a shimmering black carapace that reflected the dim light of the distant sun. Two large, glowing eyes blinked weakly as it tried to lift its head. It was clearly injured, with gashes along its side oozing greenish fluid. Despite its fearsome appearance, the creature looked helpless, almost fragile. Jacob hesitated. He knew what this thing was. Everyone in the galaxy did. Predators were legendary hunters, feared across civilizations for their strength, cunning, and ruthlessness. Yet here was one of their young, alone, and vulnerable. For a moment, Jacob considered leaving it there. After all, predators weren't exactly known for gratitude, but something about the cub's gaze stopped him. There was intelligence in those glowing eyes and pain too, a silent plea for help. Against his better judgment, Jacob knelt beside the creature. "Easy now," he murmured, holding out a hand slowly. The cub growled softly but didn't attack. Taking that as a good sign, Jacob retrieved a thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around the cub's trembling body. Then, carefully, he lifted the creature into his arms and carried it back to the shuttle. Back aboard the Eclipse, Jacob set up a makeshift medical bay in one of the cargo holds. He cleaned the cub's wounds using supplies meant for human injuries, improvising where necessary. The creature thrashed weakly at first, its claws swiping instinctively, but eventually it calmed down. Over the next few days, Jacob nursed it back to health, feeding it nutrient-rich paste and keeping it warm. He named it Shadow, both for its dark appearance and the mystery surrounding its presence on the moon. As Shadow regained strength, Jacob began to notice something remarkable. The cub wasn't aggressive like the stories claimed predators should be. Instead, it seemed curious and even affectionate. When Jacob sat nearby, Shadow would crawl onto his lap and rest there, making soft clicking sounds deep in its throat. It was almost companionable. But Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. Predators didn't abandon their young without reason, and sooner or later someone, or something, would come looking for Shadow. For now, though, Jacob pushed those thoughts aside. He told himself he'd deal with the consequences when they came. Until then, he focused on caring for Shadow, forming a bond neither of them could have anticipated. To Jacob, his actions hadn't gone unnoticed. Far away, in a hidden outpost among the stars, predator elders monitored the situation closely. Their expressions were unreadable behind their masks, but their intent was clear. The human had taken one of their own, and the council would demand answers. This completes Part 1, written in third-person style with simple language. Let me know if you'd like me to proceed with the next part. News traveled quickly in the galaxy, especially when it involved humans meddling with predators. Within days of Jacob Carter rescuing Shadow, whispers of the event reached the ears of powerful leaders across civilizations. It wasn't long before the Galactic Council, a governing body made up of representatives from dozens of species, called an emergency session to address the matter. Rachel Monroe, A human diplomat known for her calm demeanor and sharp mind stood at the center of the storm. She had been serving on the council for nearly a decade, navigating delicate negotiations and preventing conflicts between species. But this situation was different. The predators were not just any species. They were feared warriors who demanded respect or retribution when wronged. And now, one of their young had been taken by a human. The council chamber was a vast, circular room filled with holographic displays and rows of seats arranged in tiers. Representatives from various species sat quietly as the predator ambassador entered, his towering figure clad in intricate armor that gleamed under the artificial lights. His mask obscured his face, but his presence alone commanded attention. Every eye in the room turned toward him as he took his place at the central podium. "The human must return our offspring," the ambassador rumbled, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "This is not a request, it is a demand." Rachel stepped forward, her posture confident despite the tension in the air. "We understand your concerns," she began, addressing the council and the predator ambassador. "But this situation requires careful consideration. The cub was found injured and abandoned. Our explorer acted out of compassion, not malice." The ambassador tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have been curiosity or disdain. "Compassion does not change the facts. The spawn belongs to us. Return it, or we will take it by force." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species sympathized with the predators, believing their customs should be respected above all else. Others sided with humanity, arguing that the cub's life had been saved, and its bond with Jacob deserved recognition. Rachel listened intently, gauging the mood of the room. She knew the council's decision would shape not only this conflict, but also future relations between humans and predators. After hours of debate, the council reached a compromise, or rather, an ultimatum. They gave Jacob 7 days to surrender Shadow. If he refused, the predators would be permitted to use military force to retrieve the cub. The decision was relayed to Jacob aboard the Eclipse, along with a recording of the council session. As he watched the footage, his jaw tightened. He glanced down at Shadow, who was curled up on his lap, oblivious to the turmoil brewing around them. "Make me," Jacob muttered under his breath, his tone defiant. He knew the odds were against him. A single human vessel stood no chance against the predators, advanced technology and sheer numbers. But Jacob wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Word of the council's ruling spread like wildfire, sparking heated discussions across the galaxy. Some hailed Jacob as a hero, praising his courage and compassion. Others condemned him as reckless, accusing him of endangering humanity for the sake of a dangerous animal. Reporters swarmed the edges of human space, eager to capture interviews and footage of the unfolding drama. Even aboard the Eclipse, the crew couldn't escape the scrutiny. Messages poured in from friends, family, and strangers alike, offering both support and criticism. Amid the chaos, Rachel Monroe worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She contacted allies within the council, urging them to reconsider the ultimatum. She argued that forcing Jacob to surrender Shadow could set a dangerous precedent, encouraging other species to act aggressively whenever their interests clashed with humanity's. At the same time, she reached out to Jacob privately, urging caution. "You're walking a fine line here," Rachel told him during a secure transmission. "The predators won't back down easily. If you want to keep Shadow, you need to think carefully about your next move." Jacob appreciated Rachel's advice, but he didn't waver in his resolve. "I'm not giving him up," he said firmly. "Shadow trusts me. I can't betray that trust." Rachel sighed, knowing there was no changing his mind. "Then prepare yourself. This isn't going to end quietly." As the days passed, the pressure mounted. The predators sent scouts to monitor the eclipse, their ships appearing on the edge of sensor range before vanishing again. Each sighting sent a shiver through the crew, reminding them of the looming threat. Jacob spent long hours fortifying the ship, running simulations and teaching Shadow basic commands. Though the cub was still young, it showed surprising intelligence and adaptability. Jacob hoped these lessons would prove useful if things turned violent. Meanwhile, Daniel, Jacob's childhood friend and commander of a nearby squadron, received word of the situation. Daniel had always admired Jacob's determination, but even he thought this fight seemed impossible to win. Still, when Jacob called asking for help, Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'll do what I can," Daniel promised. "But you know this is risky, right? You're talking about going up against some of the deadliest hunters in the galaxy." "I don't have a choice," Jacob replied. "They can try to take Shadow, but they'll have to go through me first." Daniel arrived with 3 ships, positioning them strategically around the eclipse. Together, they formed a small but formidable defensive line. The crew worked tirelessly to upgrade the eclipse's weapons and shields, knowing every second counted. Morale was high, fueled by a shared sense of purpose. They weren't just protecting Shadow, they were standing up for what they believed was right. On the 6th day, the Predators issued a final warning. A message appeared on the eclipse's communication screen, delivered by the same ambassador who had spoken at the council meeting. "Your time is almost up," he said. "Surrender the spawn or face the consequences." Jacob stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. When the transmission ended, he turned to Shadow, who gazed up at him with wide, trusting eyes. For a moment, doubt crept into Jacob's mind. Was he being selfish? Could he really risk so much for the sake of one creature? But then Shadow let out a soft purr, nuzzling against his hand. Jacob smiled faintly, brushing his fingers over the cub's smooth carapace. "Don't worry," he whispered. "We'll get through this together." The 7th day dawned bright and cold, the stars outside the viewport shining like distant promises. Jacob knew the Predators would come soon. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Whatever happened next, he was ready. This completes Part 2, written in third-person style with simple language. Let me know if you'd like me to proceed with the next part. The 7th day arrived, and the tension aboard the Eclipse was palpable. Every member of the crew moved with purpose, their faces set in determined expressions. Jacob Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the viewport as if willing the Predators to appear. Shadow sat quietly by his side, its large glowing eyes scanning the stars beyond the glass. The cub seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, staying unusually still and calm. Jacob's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. He knew the odds were stacked against them. The Predators were legendary hunters, equipped with advanced technology and unmatched combat skills. A single human ship, even with Daniel's squadron providing support, couldn't hope to match their firepower. But Jacob refused to surrender without a fight. Shadow had become more than just a rescued animal. It was a companion, a friend, and a symbol of trust that Jacob wasn't willing to break. Daniel's voice crackled over the comm system, breaking the silence. "We're in position," he said. "All ships are ready." "Good," Jacob replied, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on him. "Let's make sure they know we mean business." The Eclipse wasn't built for battle, but the crew had worked tirelessly to prepare it for whatever might come. Engineers had reinforced the hull, upgraded the shields, and installed extra weapon systems scavenged from older vessels. Jacob spent hours running drills with the crew, ensuring everyone knew their role. Even Shadow played a part in the preparations. Jacob had taught the cub basic commands. Hopping its natural abilities could be used defensively if needed. As the hours ticked by, the waiting grew unbearable. The crew checked and rechecked their stations, double-testing every system. Some muttered prayers under their breath, while others clung to small tokens of luck. Rachel Monroe, who had remained in contact with Jacob throughout the ordeal, sent a final message of encouragement. "You've done everything you can," she said. "Now it's up to fate. Just remember you're not alone in this. There are people across the galaxy rooting for you." Jacob nodded, though she couldn't see him. Her words brought a flicker of comfort, but he knew the outcome rested squarely on his shoulders. If things went wrong, it wouldn't just be his life at risk. It would be the lives of everyone aboard the Eclipse. And yet, As he glanced at Shadow, he felt a surge of resolve. Whatever happened, he wouldn't let the cub down. Finally, the moment came. A warning flashed on the sensors, multiple ships emerging from hyperspace. The Predator fleet had arrived. Dozens of sleek, menacing vessels surrounded the Eclipse, their jagged designs casting long shadows across space. The sight was enough to send a chill through even the bravest heart. "They're hailing us," one of the crew members called out. "Patch it through," Jacob ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing the Predator commander. His armor gleamed menacingly, and his masked face gave no hint of emotion. Behind him loomed rows of warriors, their weapons ready. The message was clear: resistance was futile. "This is your last chance," the commander growled, his voice deep and guttural. "Return the spawn, or we will take it by force." Jacob stepped forward, standing tall despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "If you want Shadow, you'll have to come through me." The commander tilted his head slightly, as if intrigued by Jacob's defiance. Then, without another word, the transmission cut off. Moments later, the first wave of Predator drones launched from their motherships, streaking toward the Eclipse like arrows. "Here we go," Jacob muttered, gripping the edge of the console. "Shields up, fire at will." The battle began with a deafening roar of energy blasts and explosions. The Eclipse shuddered under the impact of enemy fire, its shields holding for now. Daniel's squadron darted around the larger ships, launching precise attacks to disrupt the Predator's formation. The crew worked frantically, manning weapons and monitoring damage reports. Despite being outnumbered, they managed to hold their ground, thanks to careful planning and sheer determination. Shadow reacted instinctively to the chaos, leaping to its feet and letting out a sharp growl. Its claws extended and its body tensed, ready to defend itself or Jacob. For a moment, Jacob worried the cub might lash out in confusion, but instead it surprised everyone. When a drone slipped past the defenses and entered the cargo bay where much of the equipment was stored, Shadow sprang into action. With astonishing speed and precision, the cub disabled the intruder, tearing through its circuits with ease. "Did you see that?" one of the engineers exclaimed, pointing at the monitor showing the feed from the cargo bay. "That thing saved our supplies." Jacob couldn't help but grin. "Looks like Shadow's got our backs too." The skirmish continued, each side testing the other's weaknesses. The Predators launched probing attacks, trying to find gaps in the humans' defenses. But every time they pushed forward, Jacob and his crew countered with surprising resilience. Daniel's squadron proved invaluable, using hit-and-run tactics to harass the larger ships and keep them off balance. Still, the strain was evident. The Eclipse's shields were weakening, and several critical systems were damaged. Smoke filled parts of the ship as fires broke out, forcing the crew to multitask between fighting and repairs. Exhaustion crept into their movements, but no one faltered. They fought not just for survival, but for something greater, a belief that compassion and loyalty mattered more than power. As the hours dragged on, the Predators grew more aggressive. Their flagship moved closer, its massive frame eclipsing the smaller human vessels. It unleashed a barrage of concentrated fire, targeting the Eclipse directly. Alarms blared as the shields dropped dangerously low. "We can't take much more of this," shouted the engineer responsible for monitoring the shield levels. Jacob clenched his fists, his mind racing for a solution. Then an idea struck him. "Divert all remaining power to the engines," he commanded. "We're going to ram them." The crew stared at him in shock. Ramming a Predator ship was suicidal, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Without hesitation, they followed his orders, rerouting energy and preparing for the collision course. Just as the Eclipse surged forward, Shadow let out a loud, echoing roar. It was unlike anything Jacob had heard before, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of space. To everyone's astonishment, the Predator ships paused mid-attack, their movements halting as if frozen in place. "What's happening?" someone asked, their voice trembling. Jacob didn't know, but he seized the opportunity. "Keep moving," he shouted. "Don't stop." The Eclipse barreled toward the flagship, narrowly avoiding debris and stray shots. At the last second, the Predator vessel veered away, breaking off its attack. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks, and slowly their forces began to retreat. For a moment the bridge was silent. No one dared to believe it was over. Then, cheers erupted as the reality sank in. They had survived. Jacob slumped into his chair, relief washing over him. Shadow padded over and rested its head on his knee, looking up at him with those luminous eyes. Jacob scratched behind the cub's ear, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. They had faced impossible odds, and somehow they had prevailed. But Jacob knew this victory was only temporary. The predators hadn't given up, they had merely regrouped. The real challenge was yet to come. The battle may have paused, but the tension aboard the Eclipse remained as thick as ever. Jacob Carter sat in the command chair, his hands gripping the armrests tightly. His body ached from hours of standing and shouting orders, but his mind was still racing. Shadow lay curled up at his feet, its glowing eyes occasionally flickering toward the viewport where the Predator fleet lingered ominously in the distance. Though the immediate threat had subsided, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Predators made their next move. Daniel's voice came over the comms system, breaking the uneasy silence. "They're holding back for now," he said, his tone cautious. "But we can't let our guard down. They're planning something." Jacob nodded, even though Daniel couldn't see him. He glanced at the crew members scattered across the bridge, their faces pale with exhaustion. Each one had pushed themselves to their limits during the fight, and yet they remained alert, ready for whatever might come next. It was a testament to their courage and their loyalty to Jacob and Shadow. Rachel Monroe's face appeared on the main screen moments later. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed her concern. "I've been monitoring the situation," she said. "The Council is trying to negotiate another truce, but you need to prepare for the worst." Jacob sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We've done all we can here, Rachel. If they want Shadow, they'll have to take us apart piece by piece." Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Just hold on a little longer. We're working on a solution." As the transmission ended, Jacob leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a brief moment. He thought about how far they had come since finding Shadow on that barren moon. What began as an act of kindness had spiraled into a galactic conflict, pitting humanity against one of the most feared species in existence. Yet, despite the odds, Jacob felt no regret. Shadow had changed him in ways he couldn't fully explain. The bond between them was unshakable, and Jacob would do anything to protect it. Hours passed without incident. The Predator ships maintained their positions, neither advancing nor retreating. Their sudden hesitation puzzled Jacob. Something had caused them to pause earlier, perhaps Shadow's unexpected roar. But what did it mean? Were they reconsidering their attack, or were they simply regrouping for a more decisive strike? Finally, the comms crackled again. This time it was Daniel or Rachel. It was the Predator commander. His masked face filled the screen, his golden eyes gleaming with intensity. Behind him stood rows of warriors, their weapons glinting menacingly. The message was clear. This was not over. "You have shown strength," the commander rumbled, his deep voice carrying an undertone of respect. "But this standoff cannot continue. Surrender the spawn or we will destroy your vessel." Jacob stood, his posture unwavering. "If you want Shadow, you'll have to kill me first." The commander tilted his head slightly, studying Jacob with what seemed like curiosity. Then, after a long pause, he spoke again. "You are brave for a human, but bravery alone will not save you." Before Jacob could respond, the transmission cut off. Moments later, the Predator fleet shifted into formation, preparing for another assault. The crew braced themselves, knowing the next wave would be fiercer than the last. "Shields are holding at 40%, one of the engineers called out. "We won't survive another direct hit." Jacob clenched his jaw, his mind racing. They needed a miracle or at least a distraction. As if sensing his thoughts, Shadow stirred at his feet, letting out a low growl. Its large eyes locked onto the viewport, watching the predator ships with a mix of curiosity and defiance. An idea struck Jacob. "Shadow," he said softly, kneeling beside the cub. "Can you do that roar again, the one that stopped them earlier?" Shadow tilted its head, as if considering the request. Then, with a deep breath, it let out another earth-shaking roar. The sound reverberated through the ship and echoed into space. On the sensors, the predator ships faltered once more, their movements slowing as if confused. "They're distracted," Daniel's voice shouted over the comms. "Now's our chance." Without hesitation, Jacob gave the order. "Fire everything we've got, target their engines." The Eclipse unleashed a barrage of energy blasts joined by Daniel's squadron. Caught off guard, several predator ships sustained damage, forcing them to retreat temporarily. The humans cheered, their spirits lifted by the small victory. But Jacob knew better than to celebrate too soon. The predators weren't defeated, they were adapting. Over the next hour, the battle raged on. The humans fought with everything they had, using every trick and tactic at their disposal. Shadow continued to play a surprising role, disabling drones and confusing enemy pilots with bursts of sound and movement. Its natural instincts made it a formidable ally, earning the admiration of the entire crew. Despite their efforts, the Eclipse's systems were failing. Shields dropped to critical levels and fires broke out in multiple sections of the ship. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Still, the crew refused to give up. They patched holes, rerouted power, and kept fighting, driven by a shared determination to protect Shadow and each other. Finally, the Predators launched their final assault. Their flagship loomed closer, its massive cannons charging for a devastating blow. Jacob watched grimly, knowing there was no way to stop it. He turned to Shadow, who looked up at him with trusting eyes. "I'm sorry," Jacob whispered, stroking the cub's smooth carapace. "I tried." But just as the flagship prepared to fire, a new voice cut through the chaos. Rachel Monroe reappeared on the screen, her expression urgent. "Jacob, listen carefully. The Council has brokered a temporary ceasefire. The Predators have agreed to halt their attack for now, but you need to meet them halfway." Jacob frowned. "What does that mean?" "They want to negotiate directly with you," Rachel explained. "They've sent a shuttle to pick you up. You'll go alone, unarmed, and speak with their leader face to face." Jacob hesitated, glancing at Shadow. Going into enemy territory was risky, but staying put meant certain destruction. After a moment, he nodded. "All right, tell them I'll come." Rachel breathed a sigh of relief. "Good luck, Jacob. We're counting on you." With Shadow resting quietly beside him, Jacob prepared to leave the safety of the Eclipse. As he stepped onto the shuttle, he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Whatever awaited him on the Predator flagship, he knew it wouldn't be easy. But he also knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't back down, not while Shadow depended on him. This completes Part 4, written in third-person style with simple language. Let me know if you'd like me to proceed with the final part. The shuttle ride to the Predator flagship felt like an eternity. Jacob Carter sat alone in the small craft, his mind racing with possibilities. He glanced down at Shadow, who had insisted on coming along despite the danger. The cub's presence brought him some comfort, but it also deepened his sense of responsibility. Whatever happened next, Jacob knew he couldn't let Shadow, or humanity, down. As the shuttle docked with the massive Predator ship, the airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor bathed in dim red light. Two towering Predators stood waiting, their masks concealing their expressions. They gestured for Jacob to follow, their movements deliberate and commanding. With Shadow padding silently beside him, Jacob stepped forward, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. The journey through the flagship was surreal. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings and trophies from countless hunts, each one telling a story of strength and survival. Predators moved about purposefully, their eyes tracking Jacob and Shadow with a mix of curiosity and hostility. Despite their intimidating appearance, Jacob noticed something unexpected, a hint of respect in their gaze. Perhaps Shadow's earlier display of power had earned them more than just confusion. It had earned them acknowledgement. Finally, they reached a large chamber where the Predator leader awaited. Unlike the others, this individual wore no mask, revealing a face marked by scars and wisdom. His golden eyes locked onto Jacob, studying him intently. Beside him stood the ambassador who had spoken at the council meeting, his armor gleaming under the flickering lights. "You have shown courage," the leader rumbled, his voice carrying both authority and calm. "Few would stand against us as you have." Jacob swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet the Predator's gaze. "I didn't do it to defy you. I did it because Shadow trusted me, and because I believe compassion is worth fighting for." The leader tilted his head slightly, as if considering Jacob's words. Then he extended a clawed hand toward Shadow. "This spawn belongs to our kind. It must learn its place among us." Jacob instinctively stepped closer to Shadow, shielding the cub with his body. "Shadow has already learned something important. He's learned trust. If you take him away now, you'd be taking that from him." For a long moment the chamber was silent. The leader studied Jacob and Shadow, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Our ways are different from yours. We value strength above all else, but even we recognize loyalty when we see it." Rachel Monroe's voice suddenly crackled over the comm system, breaking the tension. She had been monitoring the situation remotely and now addressed the leader directly. "Your Excellency," she began, her tone respectful yet firm. "The human has acted out of kindness and conviction. Allowing Shadow to stay with him does not weaken your species. It strengthens ours. It shows that understanding can exist between even the most unlikely allies." The leader paused, glancing at the ambassador before turning back to Jacob. "If we allow this, the spawn must eventually return to us. Its heritage cannot be." Jacob nodded, relief washing over him. "I understand. When the time comes, I'll make sure Shadow knows who he is and where he comes from." The leader stepped forward, extending his hand once more. This time Jacob took it, feeling the rough texture of the Predator's claws against his palm. "You have proven yourself worthy," the leader said. "But remember, this decision rests on your shoulders. Fail to honor it and there will be consequences." "I won't fail," Jacob promised, his voice steady. With that, the meeting concluded. The Predators escorted Jacob and Shadow back to the shuttle, their demeanor noticeably less hostile. As the craft lifted off and returned to the eclipse, Jacob allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. They had faced insurmountable odds and emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through understanding and determination. Back aboard the Eclipse, the crew erupted into cheers when they saw Jacob and Shadow step onto the bridge. Daniel's voice came over the comms, filled with relief and pride. "You did it, Jacob. You actually did it." Rachel appeared on the main screen shortly after, her smile warm and genuine. "Well done," she said. "You've set a precedent here, a reminder that diplomacy and compassion can go hand in hand, even in the face of conflict." Jacob nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. He looked down at Shadow, who gazed up at him with those glowing eyes. "We made it," he murmured softly, scratching behind the cub's ear. "But this isn't the end, it's just the beginning." In the days that followed, life aboard the Eclipse slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be with a growing Predator cub. Shadow continued to thrive, learning new skills and forming bonds with the crew. Jacob kept his promise, teaching the cub about its heritage while nurturing the trust they shared. News of the standoff spread across the galaxy, sparking debates and discussions among countless species. Some praised Jacob's actions, seeing them as proof that cooperation was possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. Others remained skeptical, warning that such compromises could lead to future conflicts. But regardless of opinion, one thing was clear. Jacob, Carter, and Shadow had become symbols of hope, a testament to the power of understanding and unity. As the eclipse drifted through the stars, Jacob stood on the bridge, watching the endless expanse of space stretch out before him. Shadow rested quietly at his side, its presence a constant reminder of the journey they had shared and the challenges yet to come. Whatever lay ahead, Jacob knew they would face it together. And for now, that was enough. This completes Part 5, written in third-person style with simple language. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or further assistance.